Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you, featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today my guest is Dr. Barry Fischer, who holds a B.S. in dance from SUNY College at Brockport, an M.F.A. in dance from Florida State University, and an Ed.D. in dance and dissertation based on Martha Graham's 1936 ballet, Steps in the Street. Now, I want to welcome to our show Dr. Barry Fischer, who's a fabulous, fabulous man, and we have a lot to talk about. So welcome to the Susan Brender Show, Dr. Barry Fischer.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's a pleasure.
Well, you know, Barry, the Steps in the Street, this is probably one of the most wonderful and exciting things as part of your dance collection. So I want you to tell our audience all about what that is.
Steps in the Street was originally choreographed in 1936 by Martha Graham based on the Spanish Civil War, and it was part of a collection from her masterpiece or her dance called Chronicle from 1936. It was the only section, however, that was applauded furiously by audiences whenever she showed the dance Chronicle. So she dropped all the other dances and she kept this one section called Steps in the Street. And I came across Steps in the Street in 1982 while I was at American Dance Guild Conference in upstate New York. And I was told by Allegra Snyder Fuller, who is Buckminster Fuller's daughter, who also worked in dance and video. She was a visiting professor at New York University where I was attending. And she was at the school, and while I'm going back here a little bit, while I was in the car coming back from the American Dance Guild Conference, Selma Jean Cohen, who is a famous dance historian, was sitting next to me, and she asked me what I wanted to do my doctorate on, and I told her on early Martha Graham technique and choreography. Mm-hmm. And she said to me, well, you know, you have a guest at your school, which was Allegra Snyder Fuller, who once told her in an interview that she had seen a snippet in silence of a very, very old film, and she didn't know what it was called, but she said, go visit her when you get back to NYU and ask her about it. So hence I did. I went back to NYU. I found out where she was, which was actually in the same building that the dance program was in, or dance department was in. And I spoke to her, and she shared with me what she had seen and who owned the original film. And apparently it was Martha Graham's very close friend. Her last name was Bryan, mm-hmm. and her husband was Sam Bryan. Nope, I made a mistake. Her son is Sam Bryan, mm-hmm. who was carrying on the legacy of both his mother and father. His father was video, at that time a filmmaker. Mm-hmm. And I got to meet him and talk to him and ask him about this snippet of film that Allegra Snyder told me about, and that's how I got in touch with this discovery, because it was in a vault for almost 50 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, this is a very interesting thing, but I think it's very important before we go on and tell your story to talk a little bit about who Martha Graham is, because for people, of course, who are baby boomers, they've heard of Martha Graham, but many of our young people and many of our audience probably don't even know who she is. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Martha Graham? And, it's very interesting if you would also mention a little bit about Isadora Duncan, because perhaps she had influence on Graham.
Well, I think Isadora influenced the future of modern dance, definitely. There is no doubt about that. She was a person who, in the turn of the 19th century, took off her shoes, went barefoot, and expressed herself, doing various movements to classical musical pieces. Mm-hmm. As far as Martha Graham came around. She was born May 11th, 1894, and she started dancing at the age of 23 years old in California. She went to the Denishon School, which was developed by Ruth St. Denis and Ted Shawn, who were the leading exponents of American dance. It wasn't called modern dance then. So Martha Graham was a student with Charles Weidman and Doris Humphrey, two other people who were very important in the modern dance evolution. And Martha Graham has become known as the most famous of modern dance pioneers who developed her own dance vocabulary that was based on the contraction and release of breath from the body using the abdominal muscles. Mm-hmm. And thus, it gave a very dramatic appearance in her choreography, and thus from her choreography came her technique. Mm. She never sat and developed a technique class. She took from her choreography movements and she put them into the classroom, and she asked her dancers to review what she did, and thus, over the years, it evolved into what we now know as a codified dance vocabulary. Mm-hmm. Martha.
So I'm just going to interrupt you for a second to talk
Sure.
a little bit about the solar plexus, because as far as I know, many of those dancers that you mentioned, that's how they danced.
Right.
It was about breath. It came from the solar plexus, and I want you to define that for our audience as well.
Well, I don't know if I'm the best person to define that, but I'll try.
Okay.
Everything comes from the breath, obviously. Life until you die comes from the breath. And your, of course, diaphragm, whether you're a singer or you're an actor, a dancer, or an athlete, you have to learn how to use that breath in a way that suits whatever your emphasis is, whether it's in the arts or elsewhere. And everything comes from the core, which is the solar plexus, which is the center of the body, the abdominals and the diaphragm, and your heart. Your heart is close to all of those muscles, and you feel a sense of creativity, certainly when you cry or when you laugh, and that comes from your solar plexus. I mean, that's the root of everything. And anybody who dances will talk about solar plexus. That's where Isadora, who was really, not a well-trained dancer. She was somebody at that time who knew ballet. She had taken some ballet classes in the living rooms of some rich people, and eventually went into vaudevillian dance. But then she saw another outlet, and this other outlet deals with the whole internal thing to become external.
Yes. Now, wait a minute, Barry. The internal thing became external. That's a little bit difficult for me and perhaps our audience to understand. Can you explain that further?
The external part?
Yes.
Well, that's the creation. The creation. The impetus is the internal, and then what comes out of that is the external. And there was a person by the name of Delsart who developed a whole way of thinking, which, of course, I won't go into right now, but it was about the internal, external, the passive and aggressive actions of the body. And for instance, like opening up your hand and presenting it to somebody is the passive. You're asking a question or you're asking to get something. And so you present somebody with your hand like a handshake. Mm-hmm. But the fist going forward would be the aggressive mm-hmm. part. And so for creative dance artists, the external is all illustrated by is all illustrated from their internal breath of of their creativity, of what they feel. So if they feel on one subject matter something specific, that somehow is going to come across to the audience, to the balletimains that are watching. Mm-hmm. And it's all about, Martha Graham says there's good dance and there's bad dance. There's nothing in between that. Do you get the message? A lot of people looked at modern dance for years and years and years and said, I don't get it.
Right.
I don't get it. And because they were looking too deeply, they were trying to figure out too deeply. And it was, it was a bit esoteric, but at the same time, there's a dichotomy because it was pretty simple.
Right.
Each choreographer has a different way of the creative process.
Yes.
And
yes. Well, Barry, you started your career at 19 in dance training. As everyone knows, dancing is a very strenuous art, and it takes lots of time and practice. What made you think you had the extra drive to become a professional dancer? Well,
as a child, I was greatly inspired by my mother, who was she was born in 1919, and in Brooklyn, New York, from a Jewish family, and she loved singing, she loved dancing, and I'm just going to give you a little background because this really is important for me to say how I got in there with dance. Well, in 1929, at the age of 10 years old, her parents heard on the radio that little Millie Fisher was singing this song at the Fox Movie Theater in Brooklyn, and they freaked out. And she won a contest and to be in a show called Our Gang Comedy.
Our Gang Comedy?
Yeah, which later became the Little Rascals.
Sure.
For your audiences that don't know Our Gang Comedy. And the producer came to her house with, the 10-year-old Millie, and her parents, of course, coming from where they came from in their thinking, only people of the street became an actress. Mm-hmm. So they refused to sign the contract, and thus my mother was a frustrated singer, dancer, actress. Mm-hmm. But she continued all through her life. While I was growing up, we went to Broadway shows, and she was in organizations, and thus I was raised to be, I did visual art and painting. I was in the All-Borough Chorus in junior high school, And then in high school, I did summer stock theater at the age of 15 and 16. And then I loved acting, so I thought I was going to go be an actor because I had done some of because I did the summer stock stuff. Mm-hmm. And I also went to Circle in the Square in Greenwich Village, which was at that time downtown very popular dramatic school, or a school of drama rather. And it was a dramatic school too. But anyway, I decided that by the time I was going to go to college, I'd be a theater major. When I entered to be a theater major, my acting advisor asked me, well, every actor has to have movement for the stage and dance. So why don't you tell me how much dance you've had? Mm-hmm. And I looked cross-eyed at him and I said, well, I dance at the disco, a lot. And he said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. He said, why don't you go down to the gym and fulfill your gym requirement, the 1 credit, and take modern dance 1. And that's what I did. Mm-hmm. And I took that class, and it was just the greatest turn on in the world. I mean, first of all, it took me forever. It takes guys forever to get into the studio because of how we have to, the attire that we have to put on.
Well, wait
and
a
I
minute,
won't go into detail.
Let me interrupt you now
as
well. Now, to be a good dancer and to be able to perform the way you want to perform, you really have to do a tremendous amount of exercise, and you've got to get your body in shape. So what do you do to do that? How do you do it?
Well, I was always very active. I wasn't athletic, so to speak, but I was very active, taking care of my body and being into health foods and all that stuff. And by the time I was 19 and I was in college taking this class, I just started taking one class after another class after another class, and that's how and that went on for like 20 or more years of my life, training, because you're in the studio for at least 3 to 4 hours every day, just training, taking different styles of dance like ballet and tap dance or jazz dance, modern dance, and it is grueling. It is very grueling. Mm-hmm. But it is, and even though it's so challenging, it's one of the most exhilarating spiritual experiences that you can go through, I feel.
Now, wait a minute. You're mentioning the word spiritual. Where does that fit into dance?
Well, because of the physicality, and because of working, Martha Graham would say, you're in competition with nobody but yourself. And you are alone in that studio, although there may be 30 or 40 other students within those confines, you are working for your betterment, for you to progress. And while you're there, it's almost like it's meditating. As a matter of fact, it is meditating in a sense. Mm-hmm. So, you are at different kinds of levels while you're demonstrating different the different styles of movement or choreography, and flying through the air is, of course, the dream of a dancer. Right. There can't be anything more spiritual than flying. Right. I mean, and it's just an amazing trip. It's just amazing.
Well, you're going to laugh because you're talking about dance. And when you talked about flying in the air, I think about myself hang gliding. And you know what? There is a relationship, because as I fly in the air, I feel so good. it's like a spiritual transformation for me. I see animals, I see nature, I see all these things. And I suppose that while you're flying in the air, you also think about how birds fly, how different things kind of arise as you're moving and kind of moving your hands, your body. It must be a fabulous feeling.
It is, and I must say you are a brave soul. I've always dreamt of doing hang gliding, but I'm not there yet. I'm not there, but sooner or later, people tell me I will be.
You certainly will be.
But I will tell you, flying, of course, is the upward movement towards the heavens. But in the modern dance world, a lot of it has to do with going down, and falling down and feeling the earth. And, opposite of the flight going up, it's fall and then recovering from that. And one pioneer, Doris Humphrey, and Charles Weidman, who worked together. By the way, those two came with Martha Graham from Denishon in the 1920s. And they developed a whole vocabulary based on falling and recovery. It's actually called fall and recovery. And of course, Martha did the same exact thing, but she didn't use those terms.
There you go, because she was it was before her time that those terms really became popular. Now, you became quite good friends with Martha Graham when you met her as a guest at the Royal Gardens Theatre. Could you tell us about those times that you spent with her?
Oh, boy. I wouldn't say I was good friends with her. I would say I was an acquaintance friend of hers. I was in awe of Martha Graham, and she changed my life. From the very first moment that I took class was from college. I left college and I went to take a Christmas course, and at that Christmas course she was teaching, and that's how I got to meet her and talk to her. What you were referring to at Covent Garden was when I was already a student of hers, and I went to the London School of Contemporary Dance, the Place, which was like the Martha Graham School of London, England, and Europe. And the company came there to perform, and I went to see Martha at her hotel, and the manager told me that Martha wanted me to be her guest in the Royal Box or something like that. It had a butler and privacy, and you could order any kind of food you wanted. And of course, I met her a few times after the shows. I would talk to her, and one time she invited me to go antique shopping with her.
How amazing is that, huh, Barry, to go antique shopping with Martha Graham and to be in a class with her?
Yeah, I wasn't in the dance company, and I never pretend to say that I was in the company, but I do say I'm a Martha Graham dancer. Shopping with her and then going back to her hotel and talking to her, and at that particular week, and this was 1975, and that particular week, I went to a museum and I found this beautiful sculpture that reminded me of her, and I brought her this postcard, and she laughed and talked to me about it, and it was thrilling.
Yeah.
But one of the stories I would like to share with you is the time that I was on scholarship at her school, and she was backstage resting before the company was going to perform that evening. And I was working as a gopher because the apprentice to the company at the time, or the understudy at the time, was supposed to do it, and she had absolutely no inclination or desire to be a gopher. She was not into Graham that much, and I said, I'll do it. So I went and I did it, and I had to stand in the corner for, a long time, and I was a gopher. I got tuna sandwiches and milkshakes for people, and then it closed, and then it closed down, and I had to remain there for the afternoon, and there was nobody around except a dancer, brilliant ballet and modern dancer by the name of William Carter, known to everybody as Bill, and he was one of the first ballet people who went into modern dance. And he was backstage while I was at the backstage door. That's where I had to stand.
Yeah. And
there was a knock on the backstage door, and I opened up the door, and there was Martha Hill, who was another pioneering person in the dance world. She was the chair of the dance department at Juilliard, and I was at Juilliard, but left Juilliard, and she had told me that I would be best to be at Martha Graham's, and there she was. I had just left Juilliard, and she said, "Oh, hi, Barry. I have a package for Martha. Could you give this to her?" So I said, yes, I could give it to her. I was very excited because there was nobody else there. Right. And I knew it was my opportunity because she was so safeguarded. I mean, nobody could really get to Martha Graham unless she went through her manager, who was very protective.
I bet.
And so I ran on stage, and I saw Bill Carter there talking to somebody, and I said, "Bill, I have this package, and I don't know who I should give it to. It's for Martha." And he said, "Well, go give it to her." And I said, "You mean you want me to just go upstairs and, knock on her door?" And he said, "Yeah, go do it. She'll love it." So I went upstairs, and I knocked on the door 3 times, and 3 times she said, "Who is it? Come in. Who is it?" And I was like so dumbfounded. I didn't know how to open up the door. I opened the door, and all I can remember is walking. It was like walking in slow motion.
Oh,
I saw Martha lying on this red velvet lounge with a Halston cape around her, and there were red roses all around her lounge. And her head was facing the door, so the back of her head. And so when I opened the door, I said, "Miss Graham, it's me, Barry Fischer." And she said, "Oh, Barry, my dear, come here." So I was like floating. I went over there and I went down on my knees because she was down on that lounge, right?
Yeah,
and
sure.
In her 80s. And I thanked her for the scholarship, and I thanked her for the times, and I hugged and kissed her and all that stuff. And I said, "You don't know how much this means to me in my life." And she said, "That's exactly why I wanted you there, Barry, because I know how much this means to you in your life." Mm-hmm. Now, she was referring to the night before. I was invited by her to sit and watch Rudolf Nureyev and Pearl Lang do one of her dances on stage.
You know something, Barry? I have to use this silly expression, but here it is. You are a lucky duck.
Yeah, I am. I'm very grateful because I have a beautiful, rich life today. All I could say is that I have a beautiful, rich life today. I'm in retirement. I just went through 2 hip replacements.
Oh.
Is
that as a result of your dancing?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But I never had an injury. I never had anything, and no injury while I was teaching and dancing for 30 years. Mm-hmm. It was when I stopped that arthritis kicked in. And I had moved to South Carolina because my son needed to go to a specific hospital for facial reconstruction surgeries.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me something, Barry. Do you think that anybody can dance?
Yes.
Now,
I do.
Okay, so I think so too, but I want you to tell our audience why you think that, because dancing transforms people in ways they can't even describe. It's kind of like music, too, and exercise and various other things. It changes your body. It changes your chemistry. It does so much for you. So explain why you think, why you believe, and you have such a passion for dance.
Well, I think you just summed it up right there. I mean, you know, dance has been around before man or woman ever did anything. I mean, you know, back in the caves, I mean, they danced to get food and to hunt and to and for also enjoyment. Now we've taken it to a different state, but everybody can dance. You know, not everybody can be a unique performer, but not everybody wants to be.
Right.
You know, like I wasn't that good. But I was very passionate. And, you know, I still have the passion, especially for Martha. I think when anybody puts on the music today, which is so accessible, you know, you see them moving immediately. And that could be their hand. It could be a gesture, you know, from the solar plexus, and they're out there tapping their foot, you know?
Right. Now, when you're a teacher as well, you're a professor, and you definitely must do something special to work with your students. What do you do? How do you just give us a simple process of what you say in your class? Say the first time that your students come in.
Well, let me just let me clarify something. I no longer am a professor. I was an associate professor at Frostburg State University in Maryland, and but I no longer do that kind of work. And especially now, after 2 hip replacements, I do minimal kinds of exercise. But when I would have a class, when I would start a class, first thing I would do is try to get to know everybody. I would ask everybody to find a place on the floor, which is the studio floor, an expression that I would introduce how we get to that place and why we chose that place, ask them why they chose that place, and then get to know their name. And, you know, it's such an intimate sport or intimate art form that, you know, it's important that you know who's there in that environment with you, you know, during that creative process. And I would share with them exactly what was handed down to me, how you stand before you sit, and the discipline of training, and that could be everything that I've just mentioned earlier, you know, taking different types of dance classes to dance attire.
Now, what's in the future for you, Barry? Are you working on any new projects?
No, I'm not working on any projects right now. And, you know, I keep getting friends saying, how could you just give it up? You were so passionate, and, you know, it was your purpose in life. You were, you know, I didn't have a partner. I chose dance with my partner. That's what I chose. And then I adopted 2 special needs sons by myself while I was a professor.
Wonderful.
And I dedicated my life to being a parent. And today my purpose is taking care of my 16-year-old.
Well, you are a very inspirational guy, Barry. You've done things that are quite wonderful, and I'm just curious. Don't you think that this is material for a book?
Yes, I've been told that, you know, although, you know, you just know one minute part of my life. I mean, I have been very fortunate to meet many people, and I'm not going to name them, but, you know, many people who have shared things with me. Well, I will share somebody. Louise Nevelson, the great artist, sculptress. I was first her waiter in Cafe Primavera down in Little Italy, and little did I know she was my neighbor, and I became friendly with her. And she was able to share stories about Martha Graham because They lived on the same block, East 9th Street in Manhattan, and they would see each other. So I was invited and drank out of goblets that Picasso gave her, and you know, and there were many, many other people in my life that were really like passers-by.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was not close or good friends with any of these people, but
you had the honor of meeting them, because Louise Nevelson, for those who don't know, was a very fabulous and very successful artist. And, of course, Martha Graham, I mean, who can say anything more than the mother of modern dance, along with Isadora Duncan. So, wow, Barry, your life's been rich, and you sound so passionate about it. So So what do you think? You think that a book is in store for you in the very near future, or are you working on a film, a documentary, something like that, because you deserve it?
You know, I hate the thought of deserve. I don't deserve anything. I like to use the word earn.
There you go.
I've earned my place in life.
I accept that, Jim. I think you're holding back on how important you are, because you've certainly led a very rich life, and you've done some wonderful things for people, inspired them to be dancers, and taking care of children who have disabilities or whatever. This is something special, and I feel you're a very special man. So I wish we had more time, but unfortunately right now we have to close the show, and I want to thank you, Barry Fischer, for being on the Susan Brender Show. It's been enlightening, exciting, and interesting. And let's have you back in the near future.
Sure. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for this.
My pleasure.
Opportunity.
Thank you for listening to the Susan Brender Show.